Come on. So today's lecture is Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, storage of drugs. So the continuation of our lecture, storage conditions of medicines in a pharmacy, because you have in the previous lecture you learn about procurement, then you have received the drugs, then you store the drug. Now what are when the stocks are available in the pharmacy, what are the conditions under which these drugs are stored? Now you can see, you may have an experience that at your home, whenever you purchase a drug, when you have a drug, it's covering, there is a outing covering. Now that covering has different instructions. Inside, you have a leaflet. Whenever you find a drug, inside that box or in the drug, there is a leaflet in which whole description of drug is written over there, what's pharmacology, what's dose, whatever it is. But outside that, outside that label, there are different requirements written over there. So first thing is that there can be how to dose administration, then how the dose regimen is there. But more than that, there's written the how they are stored. You can see in the labels, they're written over the temperature, at which temperature these drugs has to be stored, kept in a pharmacy. The storage conditions, a number of storage conditions are mentioned on the labels of medicinal products. These conditions have to be, first, there you can find temperature. If written over in a deep freezer means they must be kept placed under temperature at minus 15 degrees Celsius. If written over in a refrigerator means they have to be kept at 2 to 8 degrees Celsius. If there is a cold or cool means they have to be kept above 8 to 15 Celsius. If written room temperature, sometimes it's 15 to 25, sometimes up to 30 also. Means if it is a deep, if it is a required deep freezer means it's a required deep freezer means minus 15. It is a refrigerator, there must be a refrigerator. Or for cold or cool temperature, they must be have a air condition with a good thermostat, because they have to control the temperature as the requirement of the drugs. Otherwise, further, if you can find on the label is that do not store over 8 degrees Celsius, means to be stored in the refrigerator from 2 to 8 degrees Celsius. If written do not store over 30 degrees means to be stored at room temperature, means from 2 to 30 degrees Celsius. If do not freeze, not to be stored in the freezer chamber. Protect from moisture, to be stored in a normal humidity at room temperature, to be provided the manufacturer in a moisture resistance container. And if they protect from light, to be stored in a light resistance cupboard drawer, to be provided by the manufacturers in a light resistance container. So generally we can say that these are the various conditions of regulation of a temperature for the different type of pharmaceutical, different type of drugs. We can further, okay? So products needing storage in a controlled environment. Why? The usable shelf life of the following products may be reduced if stored at uncontrolled humidity or at room temperature in hot climate. Which one? So if they are not placed under the desired temperature, so they may be they reduced its shelf life or stability. So there are some injectables, example adrenaline. Most injectables properties are less stable than solid oral forms, tablets and capsules. So these liquid dosage forms or injectables, they are not stable at higher temperature. So means most injectables preparations are less stable than solid oral forms, because tablet and capsules can be stable at higher temperature. Otherwise, in certain cases, injectables are not stable at higher temperature. For that, you must have a controlled temperature. Injectable preparations in solution are particularly unstable. Many injections must be protected from lights as well as. You can have an experience that sometimes you have to bring some antibiotics in a powder form, because that injectables are that powder form antibiotics are stable. So what you have to do, you have to add the solvent. You have to add the solvent, you have to add the purified water, you have water in that syrup and prepare. Then the life of that syrups remains 7 to 14 days. Within 17 to 14 days, you have to consume, or then otherwise you have to discard. Similarly, injectables, they are unstable at higher temperature. That's why you have to provide the storage of these injectables under a controlled temperature, whatever it is required. They also have to protect from light also. So in terms of fluids, particularly packed in plastic container, they also need a temperature controlled. Further, you can say the other dosage forms are that some suppositories, pessaries, cream, ointments, these products may melt at temperature greater than 30 degrees centigrade. So what happens that these dosage forms, suppositories, pessaries, cream, if they are placed above that 30 degrees centigrade, they melt. So once this happens, it is not advisable to use them. So it means the drug is not fit for human consumption if they have gone through that higher temperature. Because what happens? Because active ingredients in the formula may get unevenly distributed. Because these are in a different form. Suppository, they have a glycerin base, pessaries and creams, they have different bases. So when they come in contact with higher temperature, they may melt, and that formulation is disturbed and they are not fit for human consumption. So that naturally these have to be discarded. That's why these has to be stored under a controlled temperature where they are required. Products containing rubber, latex, cellulose, or some plastics, condoms, must sterile, disposable medical devices, and surgical products such as syringes, needles, and catheters requires protection from excessive humidity and strong light and heat. Any of these conditions may make products brittle, stained, and unusable. What happens that if there is if the humidity is over in that area, so they have become brittle and stained, and they are not unusable. Which are the drugs are mostly rubber, latex, cellulose, or some plastics, syringes. So means they must be stored in a humidity controlled environment. That's why I told you in previous classes that there must be humidifiers must be, that device must be installed in a pharmacy over there. Dehumidifier must be installed in a pharmacy. Further, sterility cannot be assumed if packaging is damaged. So if you may have seen where this was syringes, they are striles. Written over there, they are sterile. So if their packaging is damaged, open means sterility is no more available for such. So it must be available in such a case that they do not damaged. In hot climate, these products should be stored in the coolest place possible, preferably with air conditioning or air circulation fan. So they must be stored in such a place where temperature is controlled and as per the requirement of these products. Mostly air conditioning has to be applied or air circulation may have been done. So these drugs are stored in certain required temperature. So vaccines, blood products, and many other medicines lose potency if kept even for a brief period at a temperature outside the recommended range. For these products, the cold chain must be maintained at every stage of the distribution system. So you may have seen vaccines, blood products in various labs. They must be placed under a controlled temperature. If they're exposed to that higher temperature, they are not fit for the human consumption. And whenever during transportation, you may have maintained the cold storage chain. You may have, if anyone have experience when they purchase insulin, the pharmacist or pharmacy owner, they have to give you ice packs. They have to pack in an ice pack so that when you reach at home, they may not expose to the higher temperature. So you have to keep that in your refrigerator. So if such products has to be transported, they must be cooled chain must be maintained. Freezing is a damaging at high temperature for some products, including injectables, contraceptives, ergometrine, insulin, adrenaline, and DPT, diphtheria pertussis. These are vaccines and hepatitis B vaccine. Such products, therefore, should not be allowed to freeze, not be kept in the freezer compartment. So these products, which in the adrenalines, DPT, are that one ergotamine insulin, they must be placed under refrigeration. They do not be freeze. So whenever you see these products, there is a written over this, do not freeze. Means these drugs cannot be placed under the freezing area of that refrigerator, so it will damage. So similarly, if the drug is exposed to higher temperature, if similarly they're exposed to lower temperature, in both conditions, the efficacy is deteriorated and the stability is altered, that is not fit for human consumption. Short period of room temperature during transportation or local distribution, for instance, may be acceptable for many products such as ergometrine and insulin, even though such exposure can to some extent reduces shelf life. Other items such as vaccines should always be transported in cold boxes. So these products must be for 5, 10 or 15 minutes, they may be remain exposed during shifting to the proper shelves, whatever, but must ensure that they should be placed under a required temperature. Now there are controlled drugs. Which are the controlled drugs? Which are narcotics. Narcotics drugs, these are known as controlled drugs. There's so many, it's a difference, there's a list of controlled drugs. Narcotics, for example, pethidine injections, morphine preparations, and other special drugs that may be abused are governed by special legislation and regulation. The following security measures are suggested in the form. So these drugs must be in a proper security must be done for these drugs, so no abuse can be happen. Where what they have to do? A safe or reinforced double locked cabinet fitted with a light, preferably with a red bulb that comes on when the door is open. So they must be secured and they must be under a cabinet fitted with a lock. There must be a lock over there that comes on when the door is opens. A special register recording detail of each receipt of issue with 2 signatures, physical counting of medicine after each entry and signature at handover take. So why? Because these are drug of abuse. That's why 2 person has to sign on the register whenever these has to be dispensed. Independent audit by spurious and drug inspector. Sometimes, as you know, the supervisors and drug inspectors, they can inspect these pharmacies. So independent audit should be done for the controlled drugs. So stock rotation and expiry. Why it's need of stock rotation? In order to avoid accumulation of expired and obsolete stock, medicine should be stored and issued according to the following guidelines. What are the guidelines? The stock control system must record the expiry date and the date of receipt. Stock must be stored so that earliest expiring batches are picked and issued first. The first in, first out, there is the FIFO system. In this system, the stock which is received first is dispensed first. The first expiry, first out system. In this system, the stock having an earlier expiry is dispensed first. The stock with longer shelf life should be placed further to the back or at the bottom in case of stacked boxes. This is particularly important with products that have short shelf life, such as vaccine, some vitamins, antibiotics, and loses due to expiry. Expiry date should be noted on the stock record upon receipt. Stock nearing expiry should not be accepted unless it can be used before expiry. Computerization and expiry monitoring. In the pharmacy, computerization facilities both checking stocks and expiry monitoring and helps. Keeping a check on products nearing expiry, keeping a check on non-moving and slow-moving products to facilitate the removal of medicines nearing expiry from shelves in time to send them back to the supplier. Treatment and disposing of expired medicine. Procedures need to be in place for the treatment of expired medicines. Records must be maintained for expired medicines and how they are disposed of. In case of medicines that are not returnable to suppliers, procedure for disposal needs to be followed by the pharmacy in conjunction with the administration. The following procedure can be followed. All stock of expired drugs destroyed by disposing through incinerator. Keep a record of site disposal with full details of medicines destroyed. Cleaning and maintenance. This is a very important subject over there. The storage area of pharmacy should be cleaned periodically and cleanliness should be maintained at all times. The standard operating procedure for cleaning should be designed and followed accordingly. Schedules for cleanup should be laid down and adequate cleaning equipment should be made available. What the trainee would have learned from this module. The storage of, in conclusion, you may not learn that the storage of medicine is a critical factor in the distribution cycle. Stocks received by the pharmacy should be quarantined in a separate area and necessary checks should be performed to ascertain the quality and quality of stock received. Whatever pattern and means of storage used, the products should be stored so as to maintain their potency and integrity. Storage conditions should be monitored and maintained on a regular basis. Optimum stock levels should be maintained and regularly monitored for expiry. Optimum stock levels should be maintained and regularly monitored for expiry. The design of storage areas should facilitate appropriate storage of medicines. Cleanliness should be maintained in the pharmacy. Adequate measures should be taken in case of returned medicine and recalled products. Fire precautions. Combustible trash such as cartons, boxes, and other packing waste must not be allowed to accumulate in the store. Waste should be deposited in appropriate waste bins and be disposed of on a daily basis. Fire detection and firefighting equipment must be maintained and regularly inspected. A pharmacy personnel should receive adequate training in firefighting technique and emergency actions. Fire prevention measures should include a prominently displayed no smoking sign, careful handling and disposal of combustible waste materials, and checking of electrical connections at regular intervals.